as journalists, Megan, with all due respect, I think we have to take a stand when it comes to racism, discrimination, corruption, public lies, dictatorships, and human rights. And when he's speaking, when he's expressing those really dangerous words, we have to confront them. That's our job, to ask tough questions, even if he doesn't like them.
Well, that was Univision's chief news anchor, Jorge Ramos, defining what he sees as his journalistic role. Dana Perino is co-host of The Five and a former White House press secretary under President George W. Bush. But we begin with Ann Coulter, author of Adios, America. And she introduced Mr. Trump at the speech he gave in Iowa just last night before he had that exchange with Jorge Ramos. Ann, let me start with you. So, I mean, it was interesting to hear. He said it on the record that that Univision's position is clearly pro-immigrant and believes he needs to take a stand on this issue. Your thoughts?
Well, he does. That's how they make money, keeping everybody speaking Spanish in this country. They're like Carlos Slim, who saved the New York Times from bankruptcy. They make money off of illegal and legal immigration from Mexico. It is not true that 40% of illegal immigrants flew here. He didn't listen when he interviewed me or read my book. There are an absolute bare minimum of 30 million illegal immigrants, mostly from Central America, coming across from Mexico, mostly from Mexico. There are probably more like 50 million here.
Can you speak to the point that he got into? I know you've looked at this. So speak to the point that people use against conservatives like yourself about there's no way to deport 11.3 million people. Can't do it.
Well, and I'd also say getting into that, he didn't have a question. I mean, that was very obvious from your interview with him. He was reading a statement. It was like the woman who wanted a hug from me. I get this all the time at college speeches. Activists don't understand the concept of question. Ask a question. What he said to you is, my question is too expensive. It can't be done. It's impossible. You're ruining lives. You're going to put them in stadiums. You're going to call out the army. That's not a question. Of course it can be done. I mean, the amount of money that is spent on illegal immigration, the minimum 30 million, probably 50 million illegal immigrants here. You have 71% of illegal immigrant heads of households with children collecting government assistance. You have all of the crimes, and that's not only the court costs. There are the court translators, there are the facial reconstruction surgeries, the psychologists, the wounded families, the funeral costs. There's $20 billion being sent back to Mexico every year by immigrants, both legal and illegal here. When I first went into writing this book...
I want to ask you a quick last question. We're short on time.
Sure.
Forgive me, because we had the breaking news
at the top. It's a time saver to build a fence and send them home, is the point.
Here's a last question. Speak to his allegation of bigotry. He says he has to speak out because as journalists, we have an obligation when it comes to bigotry.
Yeah, exactly what I said. He's an activist. He is not a journalist asking questions. He depends on lots of poor Mexicans living here and not being able to understand, for example, your show. So they have to watch Univision. He's an activist. Bringing in lots of poor people to compete with other poor people doesn't help the poor people already here. That drives their wages farther and farther down. He is an ethnic activist, and he was showing up to protest there, not to ask a question at all.
Ann Coulter, always good to see you, ma'am.
Good to see you, Megan. By the way, the only thing I disagree with Donald Trump on, and I told the crowd last night in my warm-up act, is his attacks on you, Megan. But you're going to have great ratings when you have him on.
Thank you so much. Good to see you. Joining me now with more, Dana Perino. All right, so what about that? He continued to say, as a journalist, you have to take a stand on racism and human rights, which does confuse the role of journalist with advocate in this reporter's view.
And in 2015, that line has been crossed by many people, and there is an evolution of journalism. When he says that Univision's position is this is their stated policy position,
to be pro-immigrant,
that is choosing a side, and that's perfectly acceptable. They're not shy about it. I'm not a fan of that tactic in a press conference in Iowa. I do think Donald Trump had decorum. He's calling on the reporter. There is this personal animosity because he's got the lawsuit against Univision. He knows that Jorge Ramos is
and the Instagram by the Univision boss. And Jorge Ramos had tweeted out the New York Daily News cover showing Donald Trump in a clown face. I mean, he's made a choice. Jorge Ramos has made a choice.
And it's worked very, very well for him and for his audience. I understand that they want questions, and I think that they could have probably gotten them. But what he was doing last night was trying to get attention for himself. Donald Trump ended up with attention to himself, which he didn't even plan on. And
but he always gets attention.
The whole story today is about the exchange and the fight with the reporter, not about the substance of the immigration plan.
So is that, I mean, but would we be talking about that, you know, the substance of it, if Jorge Ramos hadn't done what he did?
Probably not. And I do actually think that Donald Trump's a risk taker, okay? And when you are advising a candidate or a president, you would say, look, if you want to get ahead, you want to get around this issue, high risk to do an interview with Jorge Ramos, but sir, I think you should do it.
And did it.
In a couple of weeks, he'll do it. Right. And well, did it serve both purposes? I think so. At least they got everybody talking. And also, I think you can shout a question at the end of a press conference, not at the beginning of one.
Well, he pointed out, no, I hadn't seen this, but his point is 2 questions had already been asked of the Trump staffer. And so the presser was sort of ongoing. He saw an opportunity. I mean, listen, as a journalist, we always stand up. We try to get our questions answered. Dana was on the other side. For most of us, she doesn't like it. But
the thing is, like,
we're rude. We want to get our questions answered.
George Bush had a good, he had a good look, right? It would be like, sit down, right? It's just like a look. You don't have to like say anything.
Right, you don't have to say sit down. Yeah, you could do what I would. Well, that wouldn't work. I was just trying to think of other commands. But in any event, Dana, always great to see you.
Thank you.
Well, we also have breaking news tonight on a standoff in a small town in Louisiana after a police officer is shot and killed. That's next. Don't go away.